Welcome to the Alphagenix Podcast, where every week we talk to amazing guests about longevity, wellness, biohacking, and of course, men's health. And I'm delighted to be joined by James Davis, one half of the Midlife Mentors. James, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Ross. Great to be here. Sadly, only one half of the Midlife Mentors. Claire couldn't make it today, my partner in crime and my wife. But I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
We keep missing each other with Claire, don't we? Because we had a podcast the other way around where I joined you and again, she couldn't make it. But thanks very much for joining us today. Do you want to tell everyone who's watching, who is James Davis? Who are the Midlife Mentors? What do you focus on?
Yeah, so the Midlife Mentors was really born out of a podcast originally, Ross, back in 2019. I'm 50 now. And Claire's in her 40s. We've been working in a kind of like health and fitness transformative space for like a decade. Originally started running transformational retreats in Ibiza with our other company, 38 Degrees North. So launched that in 2012. I'm very fortunate to work obviously with thousands and thousands of clients and started to see quite similar things presenting for that midlife age group. But more than that, it was seeing our friendship group kind of be like, oh, this is it. This is the beginning of the end. I've hit my peak. It's downhill from here. I've got to accept the expanding waistline, the low energy, nothing really for me to achieve in life. It's like, no, it just did not have to be this way. So we were deep, we were kind of living a lifestyle, but deep into all the research as well. So we're like, it doesn't have to be this way. So that was really our inspiration for beginning the podcast, just us chatting about how you could transform your midlife, like your mind and your body. And from there, it kind of grew. We're like, well, why don't we launch a program? Why don't we see if there's a methodology we could employ for people at midlife that would just get them the results, not only for their bodies, but for the mindset as well. Because with the work you do, Ross, be aware, like the hormonal changes that happen for men and women at midlife, they have a physiological effect on us. We start to lose muscle mass. We start to hold on to fat, but people don't realize that there's always other portfolio effects of the hormones going on. They're also affecting our psychology and our mindset. So, things like we start to get kind of cognitive fogging. We become less risk averse. We can start to lose confidence a bit. You see this thing of people, I always say, when we're young, right? When we're in our 20s, we play to win. But as we get older, we play not to lose. We're suddenly like, oh, I've got all this stuff. I don't want to risk losing it. So we become more and more risk averse. We become more focused on protecting what we have. But that's kind of the opposite to a growth mindset. And it's really interesting. All the research from kind of psychology into longevity shows that if we have a positive view of aging, like we regard, old age as something good and like lots of benefits to it, we will not only have a better quality of life as we age, we actually live longer. There was a study out of Yale. And they found that people who had a positive view of aging actually lived 7.5 years longer than people who had a negative view of aging. And that's been replicated in multiple studies. There was a Whitehall study in the UK. There's stuff out of Harvard. So really our thinking was like, let's make people aware of what's going on with their hormones, how to work with those, but how to work with the mindset as well as psychology. So my background originally was I trained in psychology. I got a master's in applied psychology. I much later then moved into kind of the physical side as a personal trainer, qualified in things like nutrition, gut health, hormone health. I'm actually a menopause practitioner as well. So I'm very fortunate. I go into organizations and talk to people, women and men, about the menopause, but increasingly go and talk to men about the effects that the women in their life might have from the menopause. And I go and get to talk about the andropause to men and women as well. So feeling very privileged to do all that work. And that's kind of me in a nutshell and our, I guess, Claire and I's journey of how we got to this point here.
Amazing. I've got so many questions based on that. Blue zones obviously pop into my mind. You're talking about people with a positive outlook on aging live longer, and you have the 5 blue zones of the world, which are very community driven areas, aren't they, where have a very healthy relationship with the elders in the community. Have you looked at that? Is that part of your research?
Well, we've looked because there's a lot of research around like the effects of social isolation and community. And so this is something we looked at, particularly through the pandemic. Obviously, people were at home. And it's no secret, in the pandemic, like anxiety went through the roof generally across the board. Things like depression, stress increased. And a lot of that obviously was due to, there was a lot of fear around generally with the situation. But, people felt very isolated as well. And human beings are social animals. We're designed to be in social groupings. I mean, you talk about those blue zones. Often, the elders are quite respected, have a respected place in society. People will go to them for advice. They still have a say in things going on. So there's quite a positive view of getting older. And of course, they're still part of the community. And if you contrast that, sadly, to how it is for a lot of people in, say, the UK, we don't really value old age. And once someone's kind of finished work, they're kind of like, all right, they're done. And we all hear those sad stories of people, sat in homes where no one comes to see them, and they are completely isolated. And I think the research again is really clear. When you're in a community and you have a sense of purpose and value, again, it improves the quality of your life and your longevity.
Yeah, and we hear stories all the time, not only of people sitting by themselves in care homes, but also people retire and then their health deteriorates really quickly. What's the actual physiology behind that? So obviously we know that being busy, being part of the community helps us live longer. Why? There must be something physiological we can measure.
There is. They actually looked at this. I can't get the exact science right, but there are physiological changes in the body that are to do with longevity, something to do with the epigenetics. So actually, and again, this is why we brought psychology so much into what we do, because there's so much research now we're kind of new, right? We talked about woo-woo things. So you have things like The Secret and all, positive thinking. Everyone's like, that's woo-woo. And then we got brain scanning. We say, actually, well, different areas of the brain are lighting up. In the brain, we can't actually tell between, if we make it vivid enough and imagined and a real experience, our brain is processing the same things. And then we find that has a physiological effect on the body. So when we look at that, what's happening with these people who are having a positive view are actually experiencing physiological changes as well in terms of their cells. So we're understanding more and more this kind of mind-body connection and the effect that our psychology can have on our body. I mean, there's an amazing study where they told hotel maids that the amount of work they did, like tidying hotel rooms, making beds, etc., was like serious amount of athletic work. They should be getting like a really good burn of it. They actually all lost significant amounts of weight without changing anything else in their lifestyle, just by being told the information. So nothing's changed, but they've been given some new information, and that's had actual physiological effect. It's really powerful stuff.
Yeah, I think I remember reading that. It was like in a David Sinclair book, one of the longevity books.
Yeah, it's quite a famous study.
Yeah, and another one springs to mind where they took the cohort of older gentlemen and had them act young.
Yeah.
I think they even went as far as they sort of took them back in time. They set the scene so they were 40, not 60. They had music playing from then and really sort of set the scene if they were 40, not 60. And all of their pain scores went down, mobility scores went up, weight went down. It was powerful how it changes things.
Yeah, this is the thing. When you do that, it's helpful to feel young, have a positive. It actually reduces inflammation levels in the body. And again, it was really an interesting thing about painkillers. So I was talking to a guy, David Robson, who wrote The Expectation Effect. And he was saying the stuff like on opioid painkillers, only about 50% of the painkilling effect is from the medicine. The rest comes from our brain. And if you give people a placebo, there's a really high percentage that will have pain relief just from having the placebo. So they're not actually we'll actually manufacture our own opioid painkillers. It's crazy stuff. But it just shows the power of the mind, which is why when we set out to create our midlife method, we really set mindset as a foundation, because everything else stems from that. If you think your life is bad and it's going to go downhill and it's kind of nothing left to achieve, and that it's hard for you to exercise and eating healthy is just too difficult and all the rest of it, guess what? You'll probably, our thoughts literally create our reality. If that's the lens with which you're viewing the world, you're very likely to create that if you don't start adjusting other areas of your life. Having said that, sometimes that mindset piece can be hard to begin with, right? So I always say actions come before belief. You've got to, our minds sometimes need the evidence of what's going to occur for us before we'll fully believe in it. So I always say with clients, let's start with the small actions. Let's just start moving your body a bit more. Let's start nourishing it a bit better. And then actually, borrow some belief from us to start with. But after a few weeks, you're like, oh, actually, I do feel better. Weight has come off. I do feel a bit stronger. I do feel a bit more energized. And then the belief starts to come, and they're like, wow, okay, what else can I do? And then you can start going, well, okay, let's practice this with the mindset. Let's change this with nutrition, with the movement. So it's about building that up for people over time, so they get the solid result that's going to last them a lifetime. Because here's the thing: we live in a quick fix society, and I think a lot of people get fixated on what I call the external actions. It's like, oh, I'll do that diet or I'll do that workout. It's like, oh, you lose the weight for a bit, but then your life gets in the way, or you go on holiday, the weight comes back on. You're just like, actually, that comes back down to your beliefs. At some level, you don't believe yet you're the person that can maintain that. Now, It's not easy to change this stuff. You need to work to do it. But when you change your beliefs, and it's like, I'm a healthy person that enjoys working out and I enjoy making good choices with food, guess what? You maintain it, and that whole part becomes easier. So this is what people go wrong. They always think, if they haven't come from that environment, they think, oh, having to do exercise is going to be so hard for me, or eating healthy is going to be so difficult. But actually, it's working on the mind that's a hard bit. But once you do it, all the rest of it becomes easy.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I see you online all the time. You're looking in the gym every morning, you and Claire working out, which is amazing to see. And I guess it spurs on a lot of your clients that you work with.
I think I would hope so.
The mindset stuff is fascinating, isn't it? And I really like Joe Dispenza's work, and a lot of that, that's just framing your reality or the perception that that you look at it through, which is just incredible stuff. But you mentioned a few things in there, the mindset, the secret, your reticular activator working, all those sorts of things. Is there such a thing then as a midlife crisis? What is it? Is it just your hormones declining? Is it mindset? Is it aging? Is it a real thing, or is it just a word that we've cobbled together?
So I actually researched this. I think we looked into it, and there was it's generally attributed to a psychotherapist who, I think he first gave a talk in London, and then later, a few years later, wrote a paper on it. And he first used the term midlife crisis, and he was talking about looking ahead down the hill and how everything looked bleak going on. But he later, interestingly, admitted that at the time he'd felt quite depressed himself, and now he felt a lot better. And there is always interesting research. We've got this happiness curve, and peak unhappiness in Western societies is like around the mid-40s. 47 is the age most often quoted, but it's generally in the 40s is peak unhappiness. Now, we could speculate why that is. Personally, I think it's probably a combination of factors. It's going to be hormonal. For the guys out there, our testosterone will have declined. That can be having an impact. The other hormones are in flux as well. So, we become more insulin resistant. We have less leptin, which is like the I'm full hormone. So it could be as well. We're seeing other body changes, like we're putting on weight. We don't like what we see in the mirror. That starts a psychological effect. I also think midlife's a time of natural evaluation as well. When we're younger and we look ahead, we kind of think, by the time I'm that age, life will be amazing. I'll be at the pinnacle of my career. I won't want for anything. I'll have no stress in my life. Actually, you reach there and you're like, wow, am I quite where I wanted to be? If I am, is it actually what I really wanted? I'm juggling aging parents, kids, relationships, finances, career. It's an incredibly stressful time. So I think we also become aware that we're probably reaching the halfway point of our lives, and we can see that there is an end coming. Not to be morbid, and we start to think about what do we want to get from this remainder of our life. What do we want to achieve here? What's the legacy we want to leave behind? So I think crisis is probably a mislabeling, and I think through the 70s and 80s we had that unfortunate stereotype, didn't we, of like the man hits midlife crisis, gets a divorce, buys a red open top sports car, and starts dating a young model. And I I think we moved on to that. I prefer to see it as a midlife evolution now. And a lot of the clients we speak to, it's so interesting. They are obviously they want to get in better shape mentally, physically, improve their mindset. But many of them are also like, well, what's next for me? I'm not sure that I want this career that I've taken to this amazing level is what I want now. They start thinking about what they want next from life. So I think midlife is just this natural evolution point. I think that's driven by aging experience, by hormones, and kind of like by societal norms as well, if you like.
I love that. I love that idea that it's an evolution, not a crisis. It kind of makes me think of like a butterfly, like
the midlife chrysalis.
Yeah, that's all I could think of in my head there. Like, it's a beautiful time of your life rather than something to be fearful of. We've accumulated all of this knowledge, hopefully, over the first 40 odd years of our life. And then we get to use that and perhaps readjust, evolve, and look at what we want to do for the second half of our life. Love that. Brilliant. So with the work that you do then, is it more physical? Because obviously I do always see you in the gym. Or is it more mental perception, or actually do they have to dovetail? Do you do both?
They dovetail, and I think again, this is where we've kind of overlooked this in Western society. The mind and the body are linked. We've already seen that how we started the podcast talking about just the effect your mindset can have physiologically. I think getting people back into their physicality is often the first step if they've been divorced from that. If someone's been quite sedentary and lost connection with their body, I think reestablishing that connection is really powerful and helpful. So it's like, I'm in this thing that moves and nourishes, and it feels good when it moves well, and it's energized and it's powerful. But that has to go hand in hand with the mindset work. We have people come to us and go, "Oh, can you just give me an exercise plan and tell me what to eat?" And we're like, "No, actually, no." We turn people away. We're like, "No, we got to do the mindset stuff as well. You've got to do this coaching work, because otherwise, the nicest way in the world, I can give anyone like a workout plan and a meal plan, and they'll get amazing results. But when they finish that, a few weeks later, they'll be back going, "Oh, can I get another one?" And we want to set people up for the long term. And it sounds trite, but it is a bit of a mission to help people realize their potential and what's still out there for them to achieve. So, the two definitely go together.
They go together. And I think there's definitely been a change as well, because if I think back to when I was a child, not just me, I think society in general kind of thought 40 and 50 was old. Now, I don't know whether it's just because I am there myself now, and of course I don't think that's old at all, but I generally feel society in general doesn't believe that's old anymore, and it's pushed back 50, 60. I mean, for me, I don't even think 70 is old, and I plan on being, as healthy and fit and mobile as I can for as long as possible. But I guess that's the area that we work in. Do you think there's been a change, or is it just that me and you are getting older?
I think there has been a change. Well, I wonder whether people of our age would have said that 20 years ago as well. But you see memes going around, don't you? Of like this is what people in the 80s thought 40-year-olds were like. In sitcoms, you see of that era, 40, 50-year-olds. They're kind of like grey-haired and like in their cardies and stuff, and they were positioned as like pretty much 70-year-olds, right? And definitely now we see 70, 80-year-olds that are in the gym, still competing in stuff, really fit and healthy. So that's a really like inspirational looking ahead. But I think these days people think 40, 50, 60 is not old. People are like, okay, that's probably just entering midlife, and there's still a lot of youth and vibrancy. And I think society has changed in that way as well. Like, certainly if I do go out, I see people that there are people of my age out and about and doing things. Whereas the unthinkable, I think 30, 40 years ago, that you'd see a group of like 50-year-olds out in a late night bar or a club or something like that. But it's there and it's happening.
Yeah, agreed. And I don't know about you, but I feel healthier, stronger, and better in every way than I did when I was in my 20s.
Yeah, me too. And I think it's you know, when you're young, you've got youth on your side, but you've also got inexperience playing against you. I think when you're older, as you said earlier, you've got experience and wisdom, and you've probably learnt to be happy with who you are as well. And certainly for me, I spent a lot of my teenage years and 20s trying to fit in, and you know, trying on different identities and like trying to find the right thing, because you're not sure of yourself unless you're very lucky. I certainly wasn't. But now I'm older, I'm kind of like, well, I'm me and I'm happy being me. So I really don't care what anyone else thinks. And that gives you a kind of confidence to go and do what you want to do.
Yeah, that resonated definitely, because I spent, again, teens, all of my 20s, and probably even the start of my 30s, kind of wanting everyone to like me.
Yeah.
As you say, trying to fit in, trying to find out who you were, and very much the same as you now. Now I think, well, this is me, kind of like it or lump it. Yeah, I'm quite happy with myself, you know, I'm fully, you know, I don't care if you don't get on with everybody anymore, because you can't get on with everybody in life.
You can't, and I love that. I love that about this age, because, you know, like you said, when you're younger, you are trying to fit with everyone, and then now you're just kind of like, oh. And you know your boundaries, and I'm happy to have difficult conversations with people. And, you know, even when you're young, I feel you end up saying yes to a lot of things that maybe you don't want to do. But when you're old, you have the power to say no. And that's something I'd share with anyone listening is, remember, when you say yes to someone else, you're saying no to yourself. So one of the things we learn, hopefully, as we age, is that we become more effective at laying down our personal boundaries, and that's empowering. And people sometimes get confused, going, well, isn't that becoming more selfish? And you're like, well, no, because if you look at where a lot of conflict arises, certainly when I was younger, it's when you haven't laid down clear boundaries. You know, someone asks you to do something, you don't really want to do it, but you say yes and you go along with it. You feel resentful. They might pick up resentful. They might just push your boundary a bit further next time, until, you know, it becomes a disaster. When you're very clear, like, no, I'm not doing that, everyone knows where they stand, and it's just a much clearer communication. And that works in relationships as well. You know, have a conversation with your partner and be like, well, this is where I am. I'll meet you here, but you know, I won't go there. Again, setting those clear boundaries really helps everyone understand exactly where they are.
Yeah, I've never thought of that before. That's really powerful. When you say yes to someone else, you're saying no to yourself. And I totally get that. I guess I bet a lot of people have never thought of it that way before. And you do hear that a lot, don't you? You know, from all of the self-help gurus out there, and the influencers are always saying, you know, learn how to say no. It's a really powerful tool in your toolbox. So do you go into things like that with your clients as well?
Yeah, because often with our clients, I think by midlife, and to be fair, this is probably more true for women than for men. But they've made we've made a lot of compromises by the time we reach this point in life. For men, it generally tends to be like on the career side. So maybe they haven't seen their family as much as they want. So it might be there more about drawing boundaries to career, going, oh, you know, actually, I'm not going to work super late, like 4 nights a week, or still go away on long business trips without the family. For women, they've often had to step away from their careers to be the homemaker, the primary caregiver, and they've given everything to like raising the children. All that means is that you've kind of lost touch with your own identity slightly, and your boundaries become blurred. So a really common thing we hear is from both men and women is like, oh, kids are kind of grown up enough now that I'm not caring for them, or they might have even left home and gone to university. But without that, the relationship shifted again, and I'm not really sure who I am now after all those years. So the first thing to say is like, okay, give yourself permission to prioritize yourself, because often people will have been prioritizing children, family, career, partner, everything but themselves. They're like, okay, this is a chance for you to prioritize yourself now and think about, what do you want from your life going forward, and give yourself that permission to prioritize. Well, we don't give ourselves permission to do this stuff. So grant yourself that permission to kind of step into the new you.
Yeah, I like that. And a lot of what you said there resonated during COVID. I was in Dubai with work back at the beginning of it, and Dubai went red. So if I'd have flown back to the UK, I would have had to have gone into a hotel for 10 days. So what I did, and my wife hasn't quite forgiven me for this yet, but I flew to Costa Rica, and I spent 10 days in Costa Rica instead, because Costa Rica didn't have any restrictions on it. So I flew from Dubai to Germany. Everyone on the plane, apart from me, had to wear a mask. I didn't, because I wasn't getting off in Germany.
I mean, the rules made total sense, didn't they, Ross?
It made no sense. But, so I then spent 6 hours in the airport in Germany. Again, I didn't need a mask. Everyone else did. But I then flew to Costa Rica and for 10 days and went to a retreat out there. And the reason I share this is I had this realization when I was there that myself and my wife had said, right, we're going to work super hard in our businesses when the kids are young, and then we'll be able to spend more time with them when they're older. And I had this realization while I was there spending, just in quiet contemplation, that my children were already teenagers. And I was still working long hours, leaving the house early in the morning, away on business a lot. So that was back in 2020. I made a promise to myself then, to get myself in alignment. And actually, I've taken my kids to school 95% of the time ever since then, whereas I never had time to take them to school before. In the first couple of years, when they still wanted dad to put them to bed, I would put them to bed and, stroke their arm or whatever. And I'm a physio by background, so my son would always ask me to tell him what the bones were all called on his body and stuff. But that all came from that moment, that epiphany where I thought, wow, yeah, my kids are getting old and I'm missing it. So totally resonate with what you say there. I think that's a powerful moment that probably happens to most people in middle age.
Yeah. I love that you shared that, and I love the realignment you found with your wife. And again, this is what I do. So when I talk about giving yourself permission to prioritize yourself, it's not like, oh, I'm just going to go off and do my thing. It's about then having that conversation with your partner, aligning together as a unit. Like what? Okay, this is my journey, but what do we want to achieve together? Where are we going, and how's this going to work for us both? Because then you're taking the potential friction out of it as well. If one of you suddenly is like, right, I'm off to do this thing, and then it's like there's no communication, that's not the way to do it.
Yeah.
So I love that you had that realignment and that realization. That's really beautiful.
It's definitely been helpful. And then sort of after that as well. So my path and Joanne's path are slightly different in that I'm a bit more spiritual than she is. But again, we've had that open dialogue and communication where I said, is this a problem? Because I believe in things that you don't. I believe in the source and the universe and all these sorts of things. And she just said, I think you're crazy sometimes, Ross, but I'm totally on your side. Like, you do whatever you need to do. I don't mind if you mentioned, you called it woo-woo stuff earlier.
Yeah.
I don't mind if you have that as a passion, but I'm just going to stay over here and, read a book. But that communication is so important.
So important.
Yeah. And you've mentioned a couple of times, you work with women and with men as well.
Yeah.
Do you see big differences between male and female clients? Do they have different wants, different desires? Do they tend to peak at different times or crash at different times?
It's a really interesting question. The honest answer is, once they start working with us, no. They kind of all go on the journey in the same way. And what's really nice, we actually get a lot of couples doing the program together, and then that becomes like a shared interest. You see, it really bonds them even closer. So that's really beautiful to see. But I'd say the biggest difference I've noticed is women seem to be a lot more able to stick their hands up and ask for help. And I think this comes back, to our kind of older male-female stereotypes. I think women tend to be more social, so they'll be happy to be in a group setting. They'll communicate with each other in a group, and they're happy to like go, oh, I need help with this, help with that. I think men still have this mindset of like, oh, I can just do it all on my own, and even if I'm struggling with it, I'll just keep my head down and keep quiet. And I think as men, we've got to just learn to be more vulnerable and open and go, you know what, I could do with help with this. And that's not a sign of weakness, which I think is sadly, the way it's traditionally been played out, actually sticking your hand up and going, I need help with this, it's just a sign of strength. It's like, I want to raise myself, be better, and this is what I need help with this thing. So if I encourage any men out there that are struggling with anything, do raise your hand, because speak to a friend, speak to a professional, go into like any of these amazing like virtual communities we have now all over the internet. Find support there. You'll find that you're not alone, and once you do start taking support, you'll just find it so empowering and so beneficial to your journey. So I guess a long way of saying, no, we get more women than men, but once men start the process, they kind of go through it in the same way and get the same from it. So yeah.
Well, that's really interesting. And then again, all I could think of when you were describing that there was the typical guys don't ask for directions kind of thing. We'll just plow on and get lost and go around in circles rather than ask. And what I found really interesting with what you just said was, you said men need to put their hand up and ask for help, but you also said they need to ask in the right place. And as you rightly say, there are communities out there, there are great people out there, like the work you're doing and the work that we're doing, where people can ask. Because I feel that this whole issue is bigger than most people realize, and men just can't open up to anybody. That could have, in my opinion, disastrous results. If you open up to your boss, but your boss isn't ready, maybe you get sacked. If you open up to your wife, and your wife hasn't done enough work on herself to accept that responsibility, maybe you get divorced. It's not easy, but I think, as you rightly say, there are now some fabulous groups out there, and there are lots of people, of course, in all of our lives that I'm sure can and would help if men put their hand up. So I love the fact you mentioned that, because most people just say, oh, men just need to be vulnerable. Well, I'm sorry, I don't agree.
It's not that easy, is it? It's not that easy. I mean, you're right. The consequences can be very severe. I mean, the stats on particularly midlife male health are terrifying. It's the highest suicide group, some of the highest rates of depression, and a lot of this gets buried as well because men haven't felt able to open up. I think as men, we're like, I have to appear like strong all the time and not show my emotion. And if I do show it, that will be a form of weakness. But actually, it's not, and it's not helping anyone by just internalizing all that stuff. We're saying like it's putting your feelings in the post, right? You can keep dropping that into the post box, but then one day the bell's going to ring. It's going to be the postman with a massive sack, and that's when it's crisis time.
Yeah.
But it's about finding the right people. You're right. Yeah. Just saying, oh, be vulnerable. Thankfully, like I did some work last year with a big city firm that was very kind of alpha culture. But a lot of their work was about having these conversations for senior managers, because they were seeing they were seeing the effects of it in their workforce for middle-aged managers. And it was about getting the leaders to step up and be like, it is okay to raise these things and talk about these things, and point people in the direction of where they could go to have conversations about it.
Well, that's brilliant, because if you do think of the typical high sort of flying C-level executive, they're suited, booted, high stress. If they mention any weakness to their boss, they're probably going to get sacked. So great that actually those type of industries are embracing this as well and training the managers to recognize and then deal with it. And do you get involved with that as well at a corporate level?
Yeah, we run workshops on it, and we've run some programs as well. So that's really gratifying work, because the corporate one's always tricky. Like, cause, when you have an audience there, you're generally like, how many of them want to be there, because they genuinely do. But I think with the topics that we cover, there is a genuine interest there, and it's stuff that hasn't really been talked about in the workplace before, I think. And it's great to see since the pandemic. And I think with the culture change, with the younger generation coming through into the workplace now, I think before a lot of places kind of had a tick box exercise for wellness. It'd be like, oh yeah, there's a yoga class once a week and you can have a massage on your chair, Whereas now, what we're hearing is the younger generation coming to workforce are actually like, well, I want to know what you're going to do for my health and well-being, particularly my mental health. and they're starting to realise that they actually want to protect the older generation as well. Because we're seeing the stats, more and more people retiring earlier, and it's creating this brain drain effect. Because when those people leave, they're also taking a lot of kind of unofficial wisdom and experience with them as well. They're often, we have this thing called social currency. So that's kind of like the unofficial knowing how to get things done. You've got your official job role with its things off it. But there'll be these people like, oh, I know, I'm going to speak to Bob about this, or, go and speak to Sue in accounts about this. And when they're gone from the organizations, they're like, oh, how do we do this? Why isn't this thing that used to work so well working anymore? So companies are starting to realize they need to invest more in their wellness for their client. And in turn, we're seeing, I think, more of the employees step up and go, I actually want to learn this stuff.
Brilliant. And that almost takes us full circle back to the beginning, where we're kind of talking about, we should be holding our elders up on a pillar. These are like the elders in blue zones, where we look to them for advice, instead of in the Western world where, it's like a conveyor belt. They get towards the end of their career and it's like dumped off the end. What we're saying there is actually they've got social currency. They've got knowledge that we should be tapping into.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting. I think if we look at it, I love like cultural history. If we look at something like the Industrial Revolution, that came along and it dramatically changed our way of working. So suddenly we're all working units, and it's mapped out for us, right? We go to school to get an education. We either then go straight into work, or we go to college or university and then go into work. And then we work until we hit 65, and then we retire, and our usefulness to society is over. And I know certainly if we go back 50 years, the stats on men in particular retiring and then dying within a few years of retiring were horrific. Of course, what we have now is people retiring early, but even if you retire at 65, it's not that you've got another 5 years left of your life. You've got probably like 25, 30 years left, and that's getting longer and longer all the time.
Yeah.
So it's up to us as individuals to take responsibility for what do we want to get from that time. And it's not only about, of course, longevity, it's about the quality of life, which is why, the work you're doing is so important. And just getting people like into that healthy mindset of moving their body. So it is true. Now we know from research, it's like use it or lose it. If you sit around immobile all day, you're sedentary, guess what? By the time you're 80, you are going to struggle to get up out of an armchair. And if you're going to live to 100, that's 20 years where you can't move around unaided. Is that what you want for yourself? Like, it's not too late. The earlier you can start, the better. Just get up, start moving your body. Even if you're not an exercise fanatic, if you hate it, just start walking to start with, and then slowly, build it up. You don't have to be going for Guinness World Records or, trying to smash someone in the CrossFit box. Just find something you love doing and start moving your body and nourishing it in the correct way, because you will feel better in so many ways in yourself. It boosts your immune system, make you less likely to get injured, less likely to get ill. But it's about the quality of life you want going ahead. So don't think about the results. If you're thinking, oh, I want to lose some weight, that's great. Don't think about the results for now. Also think about the future proofing you're doing for yourself down the line.
Yeah, 100%. And that use it or lose it analogy is so important from a physical point of view. Your muscles, if you don't use them, they will waste, atrophy. Yeah. If you use them, they hypertrophy, and we stay strong. But from a hormonal point of view as well, which I know you've mentioned, and it's what we're passionate about, testosterone in men has reduced by 50% in the last 60 years.
Yeah.
We have to consider the toxins in all of the environment, xenoestrogens, but also we don't move as much as we used to. Me and you, when we were kids, were out, straight after school, on our bikes, playing football, running about, being active. So we needed more energy. We needed more hormone production because we were more active. My kids now, they come home and then they're just on, if we let them, they would spend all night on TikTok, on their phone, on an iPad, on a computer, on an Oculus. Like, they just don't need as much energy. And I think that's having a real negative effect on the actual hormone production and on every system within the body. So I think use it or lose it goes beyond just the muscular system, musculoskeletal system, and actually deeper into many of the systems that our body requires.
I can believe that. And I think, sadly, Ross, we're probably, we're seeing that now when we were a generation that did play outside and did. I saw another great meme. I don't spend all my time on social media, by the way. I saw a great meme. It's like a bunch of kids. It's Black Up Folk and a bunch of kids, I guess, in the late 70s or early 80s, just out in the street on bikes and like little homemade go-karts. They said we were the last generation to have this. We didn't know how lucky we were. And I wonder, for the generations that have come later that have had that, like reduction in PE at school, dropping of sports at school, and basically no physical activity, and they get home and they just sit and they watch TV or play computer games, what effect that's going to have on hormone levels that we'll see 20, 30 years from now.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned, the Industrial Revolution and how things have changed since then, both parents going to work, prior to that, young boys in particular would go out to work in the fields and things with their parents or their dad, and they'd have this strong masculine figurehead, and I think that's been lost. So it makes me wonder what's next, because of course we are on the very, very edge of the fourth industrial revolution, and AI. ChatGPT is mind-boggling. It's amazing, and that's just an iceberg. So what's going to happen next? Because potentially as a species we're going to become even less active.
I know, and that's a terrifying thought. I mean, you say there about AI, and it's amazing what's out there now, but we are seeing, as you say, just the tip of the iceberg, and we know these things have exponential growth as well. It's really hard to forecast. So this is someone said that before the launch of the public launch of ChatGPT, a year before that, they said the first jobs to be replaced by technology will be blue collar jobs like factory workers, stuff like that, because you have more machines, more robots. And then ChatGPT came out, and actually, white collar workers will be first to go. Lawyers, accountants, paralegals, because that can all be done now. You can literally go into that and say, draft me a contract, do this, do that. It will do it. And they said that's only because the AI technology is cheaper for that kind of work than it is currently for robotics, but that will change as well. So then we're going to have a problem about how much of everything is automated and what role not just men, but humans play in a workforce where there's not that much need for them. And I think what we're wary of is whether too much knowledge of how all this works might end up concentrated in one place. We saw in the pandemic how a lot of money shifted only to big companies. Imagine if 3 or 4 companies have all the proprietary AI for all the robotics in the world. What could that look like? I don't want to paint a doomsday picture, but what will the human population be doing? I guess in a utopia, I remember reading books when I was a kid, the kind of like the future books. They're like, by the time you're an adult, we'll have like flying cars and you'll only work 2 days a week because we'll have supercomputers. And actually, what we've learned is we've handled this amazing technology. We've actually become more slaves to it. It's actually made us work longer and harder. Think of our fathers. They got up, they went to work. Their work started when they got to the office at 9 o'clock, and it finished when they left the office at like 5:36. And they weren't contactable after that. It was a real emergency. They could phone the landline. Now it's generally expected that you'll be answering emails, available for stuff, not 24/7, but maybe like 15, 16, 17 hours a day. And we know that the social media is more addictive. We're addicted to the ping of our phone with the email. So it'll be fascinating to see where it goes and kind of what role humanity will need to carve out for itself in that new world. And I hope it feeds us up with more time to do more creative and positive stuff and connect and help each other.
I truly hope so as well. Do you think that we are at the technological peak of our existence as a species at the moment, and we're the unhealthiest we've ever been? There are more rates of obesity, suicides, I think probably the highest it's ever been. Chronic illness is up. The amount of people who take pharmaceuticals to keep themselves healthy, or chronic illnesses and chronic inflammation, is the highest it's ever been. So if AI advances us again, do we get more unhealthy? Like, I can't figure it out, but hopefully, as you say, it's going to free up our time. We'll spend more time in building our community, looking after our health, spending time in nature, and it'll be a positive thing.
I hope so. I think as men of our age as well, we need to actually stand as examples and leaders for the generation that's coming, because they are going to face a challenging time. We already know there's like a dating phenomenon where women date up and men will date down. I don't know if you know this. So women will look for a higher value partner. Now, that means that on dating apps, because that's just down to an algorithm, people aren't meeting as much in real life anymore. Males who are less advantaged are finding it harder and harder to get dates, essentially, or to form relationships. And I think technology is also, we're seeing generally across the board, making it harder for people to form relationships. Now, if you throw AI and things like VR into the mix, it's not hard to imagine at a not too distant point in the future where it'll be a lot more seductive for someone to put on a headset, be in a world that they control with partners they control that are programmed to respond to what they like and want, and never argue with them, than actually perhaps to be in the real world and try and form a relationship with a real person that has feelings they can't control and manipulate. I think we need to be very wary of that and kind of stand as flag bearers going, well, we remember what it was like before, and we want to guide you in this way.
That's just scary, really, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? That we could get to that point. And it reminds me of like Ready Player One and, some of these movies where people don't leave the house.
Yeah.
But I mean, that to me sounds awful.
Ross, I don't think we're that far from it. I mean, not to be alarmist, I'm sure there are probably already people that do sit and spend most of their time, just playing games or watching things or have headsets. And as this stuff evolves and becomes a richer, more fulfilling experience, if your own life is like really crap, but you can live an amazing life as like everything you've dreamed of as a playboy in a virtual reality, where are you going to end up spending most of your time? And I think that's something we need to be really aware of and kind of guide people to the importance of human relationship and human connection.
And again, to go back to something you said earlier, we live in this I don't think you use this word, but along the lines of, we live in this convenient world, and actually the seduction of what we're talking about now is it's easy. You don't have to try. You don't have to have a difficult conversation with your partner or with your friend or with your boss, because you can hide behind the VR or this alternate reality.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said about the stats, I saw one the other day, but they say by 2035, 50% of the world's population will be obese. Now, if you think about developing nations where there isn't much obesity, for the Western world, that means horrific stats.
Yeah, and of course we know that obesity is strongly linked to almost every other health problem out there, including hormonal issues, mental health problems, chronic illnesses, which is really, really worrying. Wow. Well, we've gone off probably on a bit of a tangent.
But fascinating. Great to speak to you, Ross.
Yeah, really, really fascinating. And I guess if anyone's been watching and what you've said has resonated with them, how do they get in touch with the Midlife Mentors? How would they approach you to ask for your help?
So you can go to our website, which is themidlifementors.com. And on there you'll find contact form. We're about to launch a funky little quiz, actually, so you can get your midlife health and happiness score. It'll give you a personalized report as well, and a little video where you get actionable steps to take away, looking at things we discussed here, like where are you on your mindset, your understanding of your hormones and what's going on, your movement, all the rest of it. So yeah, you can go there, check out our podcast, the Midlife Mentors, and we're on most social channels as either at the Midlife Mentors or at Midlife Mentors.
Amazing. Well, James, say hi to Claire. It's been a really, really fascinating chat. I've loved every minute of that. And so I guess I'll speak to you very soon, and have a great day.
It's been great, Ross. Thank you so much. Have a great day.